It's March 3, 2020. I'm Todd Dunn, and today I'm going to show you how I built a standalone chart plotter for under $200 to go on board my boat. So let's get going. The core of this system is the processor that runs the chart plotting software, and I'm using a single board computer. This is a Raspberry Pi 3B. My hand in there to give you scale. It's pretty small. This little computer has a quad-core microprocessor, and it also comes equipped with 1 GB of RAM. The operating system and other memory is on a micro SD card like that. That's a 16 GB micro SD card, and it plugs in right over here. And that's it. Why use this? Well, it's cheap. This computer costs, as it is right there, $35. There is a more up-to-date version of this computer, which is the Raspberry Pi 4. It's available with different amounts of RAM, which affects the cost. If you get the 1 GB model, it's $35 like this one. And you can go up to a 4 GB computer, and that's $55. So there we go. That's the processor that's going to run the software. Now, I have already loaded the operating system and some chart plotting software onto this computer. And in particular, I decided to run a program called Open CPN, which is an open source chart plotting program that is very sophisticated, and we'll talk about that a little more later. So, what is the next component that we need for this system? The next thing you need is a screen. This is the official Raspberry Pi 7-inch touchscreen display. It's relatively low resolution at 800 by 480, but this is a small screen, so you don't need super high resolution. It comes with some jumper cables to connect it to the Pi, but we won't be using those today, and a ribbon cable to connect it to the Pi, but we won't be using that either. And you'll see why in a second. The next component that you're going to need is a case, and I brought this relatively fancy case for $28 that both the screen and the Raspberry Pi itself mount to. It comes with a stand, so you can mount it on there so it'll stand up by itself, which is great because I intend to put it on my bridge deck. The case comes with a variety of components. Depending on how you set your system up, you can get 2 different backs. This one accommodates a small fan, which you can attach to run at 2 different speeds, low speed or high speed, to cool your computer. It isn't strictly necessary with a Raspberry Pi 3B+, but I'm going to put it on anyway. And it also comes with some ribbon cables and a couple bags of hardware and some power connectors. And has 2 power connectors. This one is if you have a Raspberry Pi 4, which uses USB C connections, and if you have a earlier Raspberry Pi like I do, I have a 3B+, you use this one, which has straight old USB 2. So those are the parts. Now let's put it together. Neither the screen or the case came with instructions on how to put them together and how to attach the Raspberry Pi to the screen or to put it into the case. However, after a little looking around, I discovered that on one of the power cords it had an instruction that said smartycase.com/setup. So let's go to that website. And see what it has to say. There it is. First thing it says to do is to update the firmware on your Raspberry Pi. Now you're going to need to have your Raspberry Pi connected to a screen and a keyboard to do this. You can attach a screen via HDMI and a keyboard via either a USB connection or via Bluetooth, depending on what you have. And you can run these commands in the Raspberry Pi terminal. They're very straightforward. However, this full upgrade command can take a while. It took about 25 minutes on my Raspberry Pi 3B, so don't expect to just type these in and be done. But this will completely update your computer to the latest version of the operating system. And it tells you what kind of power supply you need for the system. And I have one here that came with my Raspberry Pi, and this is a 5 volt 2.5 amp power supply, and it should work just fine. And then it tells you about the two cables, the one for the Raspberry Pi 4 and the one for older Raspberry Pis, in my case a 3B plus. And it has this Y shape because one connector will go to the computer itself, the Raspberry Pi, and the other one goes to the screen to provide power for both. You can power the screen directly from the computer, but that stresses the computer a little bit more than you absolutely need to, so it's good to power it externally. Now we've got the connections. So rather than read all these instructions to you, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read them off the screen here and assemble the computer and show you exactly how to do it. Okay, here's the screen, and if we turn it over, you can see that back here we have an interface board that's attached to the screen. And the first step is going to be to get rid of these standoffs, which are currently holding the interface board onto the back of the screen. The reason to replace these standoffs, which are for attaching the actual Raspberry Pi to the back of the screen, is that the screen won't fit into the case with those standoffs in place. So I'm going to grab a screwdriver and replace the standoffs one at a time so I don't end up with anything moving. And it says to use the gold colored screws. There we go. I think these are just brass screws. And this will let the screen fit nicely into the case. There we are. And we'll keep the standoffs for later use. As you can see, this is pretty simple. We're just physically securing this interface board to the back of the screen. There we go. It's all ready for the next step. Now the screen came with a ribbon cable to attach it to the Raspberry Pi computer, but this cable is not long enough to connect the screen and the computer in the case because they're a little too far apart. The case came with two ribbon cables. One, as you can see, is quite long. This one is for attaching a Raspberry Pi camera to the Raspberry Pi, which can then mount in the case. I'm not going to have a camera, so we'll put that one aside. And here's the one that came with the case to connect the screen to the Raspberry Pi when the Pi is mounted in the case. And it's pretty simple. This is the connector you use. This is a DSI connector, and we're going to plug this in so that the writing on it is up. And the blue tab on the other end is also up. Okay, to do that we have to release the lock on this, which is right there. Have to get your fingernails under it, pull it out a little. There we go. Then this just plugs in. There we are, and we'll put the lock back in. I guess that's it. That's in there pretty good. And at this point, we're ready to mount the screen into the case. So I'll get the case out. And here it is. And the screen is going to go in here. Okay, here's the screen. And that ribbon cable is going to go through here. And the screen will just sit in there like that. And at this point, I think we're going to flip the case over with that cable coming out. And there are 4 screw holes here, 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 and here that you can screw the case to the back of the screen with. And that's pretty straightforward. I'm using the wrong size screwdriver. Okay, 1. And the instructions tell you which screws to use. The only trick is that some of the spots are a little small and you have to get the screws in there properly. There we go. And let's find the next screw to go over here. And these go in these holes here. It's a little tricky to get them in there. That one kind of fell off to the side. See if I can do it this way. There we go. And this one went in sideways. I'm going to have to dump it out. And we'll try again. There we are. Okay, now the screen is in the case. The next step is to mount the Raspberry Pi itself. Now, the Raspberry Pi goes in here. We'll lift this cable up so it's out of the way and set the Pi onto 4 pins here. They come in like that. Now we're going to take this cable and it fits into this connector. So I think what I'm going to do is pop that connector open and we'll fit that cable in and then we will be able to push the whole thing together. I can't really see where it goes here. There was a little cover over that. So this just slides in like this. And we'll secure it. Now the Pi can go in here, this way, over those 4 pins. And at this point we can put the back of the case on, and that should be that. Back of the case just slots into a couple of holes up here. Have to see, I can't see them without looking there. There and there. And that can go down like that. And we will snap it in, and that will hold the Raspberry Pi in place. So there we go, we're all connected. And at this point, all we have to do is hook power up to the Raspberry Pi and to the screen, and put the base on the case, and we're in business. So I'm going to turn this over, and the Raspberry Pi connector is right here on this end. That just plugs in. If I can get it in there. Now it goes the other way. So that plugs into the computer. That's the power supply. This one, and this end plugs into the screen. Now the only thing left to do is to mount the base of the screen, and if I wanted to, I could put the fan in. I think I'm going to start it up without the fan initially, and then after a while I'll install the fan. This is pretty straightforward here. Now installing the mounting plate is pretty easy. I'm going to pull this up so it's out of the way, and I want the mounting plate to go this way, so it just slides in like that. And there are some screws provided. Once you get everything lined up, we'll just go through like that. And there are some nuts that will fit into there. I'll come back and get those in a second because I'm going to have to pick this up to do them. So we'll just get both sides in there. And I'll feed the nuts in and tighten up the screws. So just give me a second and I'll get that down. The case here has got little hexagonal cutouts for the screws to fit in. So all you have to do is start them in there and then tighten them up. There we go. I'll do the other side. So at this point, we're ready to power the system up and see if it works. So I'm going to find a place to plug my power supply in and feed it up and plug it into the power connector on the back. Okay, I'm all set for powering this thing up. So what I'm going to do is plug my power connector in to the computer, and then I will go down and actually plug the power supply into AC. Right now I am using an AC power supply, which could be plugged into a small inverter on the boat. There we go. And the Raspberry Pi will boot up. We'll see how it's going to go. These take a few seconds to boot up. There's the Raspberry, and it will gradually load. This is running an operating system called Raspbian, which is a Linux variant. Okay, there we go. Raspberry Pi computer is up and running. And down here we can see Open CPN, which is the plotter software I have loaded. I have not been able to just double tap it and get it to load. So what you'll do is I'll touch this little raspberry symbol up here. That'll open a menu. The program is located under Education, and it is Open CPN. There we go. And that should load up. Give it a few seconds. There we are. And right now I do not have the GPS hooked up to it, and it's looking for it, didn't find it, so just say OK. Now what I'm going to do is go here to View. Let me get that. And go down to the bottom. Oops. A little fussy. And enter full screen. There we go, full screen mode. And let me zoom in on that. And focus up a little. And there we go. This is my 7-inch Raspberry Pi based chart plotter. Right now it's showing the Great Harbor of Mount Desert Island, Maine. We can zoom in a little bit here. And I'll move it so it's up in the center. Zoom in a little more. And here we go. This is Southwest Harbor, where I keep my boats. And this is the Great Harbor, which if you've been following my videos, you've seen me cruising around on my sailboat and on Tortuga, my 1936 wooden powerboat. Now, let me talk a little bit about Open CPN. Open CPN is open source software, but it's a very sophisticated navigation program. It has a number of options for the charts that it uses. Here in the United States, I have chosen to download charts directly from the National Oceanographic Administration. And you have a choice with this program of using vector charts or ENCs or raster charts, which are essentially pictures of the official navigational charts. Now these are official navigational charts downloaded directly from the NOAA website. And so they're as accurate as can be, and these are up to date. I downloaded them just the other day, and they are fine. The download mechanism is built into the program, so you can do it directly from this program. You don't have to do anything fancy, and just download the charts that you want for your area. And as I said, this is a touch screen, so I can move it around if I want. I can zoom in and out here, or I can do this way. Let's see if I can get this right. Well, my finger, the screen is a little cold and it's not working very well. Well, sometimes my fingers will work, and I can zoom in and out just by spreading my fingers or compressing them. We can zoom in quite a bit. There's Southwest Harbor in a little more detail. And so this is very useful. Now if I plug my GPS into this system, it isn't just a chart viewer, it becomes an actual plotter because it will get position data from a GPS. You can use a USB GPS puck like this one. These cost about $20, and it's not going to pick up any signal because I'm in my basement right now, but I can turn it over here and just pick one of the 4 USB ports these computers have and plug it in. Let's see if I can get it right. There we go. See if I'm back on the screen. And then I'll just turn the GPS on. And if I wasn't in my basement, in a few seconds it would find a position and the system would go to that location. And then if we were moving, it would show a little ship icon and move around. I think I can show you where the ship icon is right now if I move down here a little bit. Maybe I'll zoom out a couple. See if it's still there. Yeah. Here it is right there. And I set some range rings up. Those are half-mile range rings. You can define those to be whatever size you want. And if you want to display them, this program will work in course up or north up mode. Now I've chosen, when I've used this program in other computers, I've usually done it in north up mode and used the raster charts, because north up mode and raster charts are much less processor intensive than vector charts, and consequently the system works much better. And with the Raspberry Pi, which isn't a super powerful computer, it seems to work pretty well that way. This Open CPN program has a number of other advantages over commercial programs. It has all the functionality of a commercial program, and in addition, I can buy an add-on board for the Raspberry Pi for about $60, and the system will then do AIS, which is very useful if you're in a high traffic area. And that's about the cheapest AIS receiver you can buy, $60 to add AIS to this little chart plotter. And Open CPN also has an add-on to connect a radar to it and do radar overlay. And depending on the kind of radar you have, you might have to buy an interface. But for my radar, I think, although I haven't connected it yet, I should be able to just plug my radar directly into the Ethernet port and get radar overlay. So this little plotter, it's a 7-inch diagonal screen, will give me full GPS chart plotter capabilities. I could add AIS to it if I want. I probably won't, because we don't have much traffic that has an AIS transmitter in it around here. And I can hook my radar up to it, so this will be a radar display. So if I still have to buy a radome, obviously, but I have one on the sailboat, and I'm going to try that once I get the boat in the water, if that happens this year. This coronavirus thing has got us all up in the air as to what's going to happen. So anyway, that's my little home cobbled together 7-inch chart plotter, and it's pretty neat. You can do all sorts of stuff with it. We can go back to just the Raspbian desktop. Now I should say before I go that this Raspberry Pi is a fully functional computer with this desktop. It has Wi-Fi, it has Bluetooth, it has I can use it as a web browser. This is the web browser up here. And also it comes with a lot of built-in programs. For example, it has under Office here, it has a database program. Well, touched it. It's a touch screen, so it's a little, got to be careful with it. Oh, come on. My finger is too big for this size screen. Yeah. It's also a little fussy. Okay, here we go. Office has a database program. It has a spreadsheet. It has a text editor. You know, basically a word processor program. All sorts of things that you can do with it. So it's quite sophisticated in that respect. Get that closed. And that's basically the system. Now, the reason I did this is I wanted a chart plotter on board Tortuga, but I don't want a great big fancy one. I didn't want to spend much money. This system, as it stands right now, with the screen, the computer, the case, a power supply, and a GPS, comes to about $150, which isn't bad for a 7-inch display touchscreen chart plotter. Now I can also hook a mouse to this and a keyboard if I want. They just plug in to the USB ports in the Raspberry Pi computer, and then I can use it just like any other computer. Now, if I was doing this again, I would probably have bought a Raspberry Pi 4, which is a slightly more powerful version of the Raspberry Pi than what I have, which is a Raspberry Pi 3B+. And I probably would have gotten one with more than 1 gigabyte of RAM. They come with either 1, 2, or 4 gigabytes for slightly more money. The 4 gigabyte Raspberry Pi 4 costs $55, so it's, you know, still cheap. Oh, I should say, I am going to do a couple more videos on this system in which I will show you how to download Open CPN and get it loaded on the Raspberry Pi. It's a little different than downloading a regular program, but it's still pretty easy. I'm also going to show you how to connect the GPS and get it working. And I'll take it out to my truck and do a little drive around, since I can't go out in a boat now, and we'll see how it works. And I should say one other thing about it. This thing draws about 12 watts when it's running. Maybe a little less, maybe 11 watts. So that's about 1 amp hour, which is really quite good for a chart plotter and simultaneously a computer on board your boat. So that's where I'm going to end this today. If you liked the video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't, please subscribe to my channel to see more content about this and all sorts of other things. Thanks for watching.